so much for joining Esper and APS as we celebrate the voices of the Harlem Renaissance stamps issued by USPS today. The Harlem Renaissance was such a blossoming period of African American culture, we simply did not want to miss celebrating these stamps. We were absolutely driven to do this. When Esper conceived the idea of doing a virtual celebration, we immediately asked APS to partner with us, and they were on board immediately. Thank you, APS. Thanks also to the United States Postal Service, and particularly Artist Montgomery, as he has been so critical with sharing support throughout this process. Also, thanks to our special guest speakers and to those of you joining virtually today. I'm honored to be your host. A little bit about me. In addition to being the president of Esper, I'm also the first director of social media for the organization. My stamp interests include African Americans, women, healthcare, science, and childhood interests. I also love collecting art by stamp artists and books in which stamp artists are the illustrators. Additionally, I've grown quite fond of art that highlights stamps, and I'm a collector of works by Amina Robinson, as well as Shirley Johnson. I received my undergraduate degree in biology at North Carolina Central University in Durham, and my doctorate of medicine at UNC Chapel Hill School of Medicine. Additional medical training was completed in psychiatry at UNC Chapel Hill, as well as Duke University School of Medicine and the Medical University of South Carolina. We have an exciting program for you. First, Walter Faison and Scott English will share history as well as initiatives of Esper and APS respectively. This will be followed by a glimpse into the future of stamps that will be issued in June to September by USPS Stamp Services Director Bill Glicker Jr. I will share history of the Harlem Renaissance, and then Bill Gicker, will share details on the voice of the Harlem Renaissance stamps, and the stamps will be unveiled virtually at that time. Scott will introduce stamp artist Gary Kelly, who will then share his artistic process with us. Then Scott and I will come back together to close the program. Let's get started, shall we? Coming first to the virtual stage is Walter Faison. Welcome, Walter.
Thank you, and thanks for the introduction, Warshel. Please allow me to echo how thankful we are to be collaborating with the APS and the USPS, and a special thanks to tonight's speakers and those who have joined us this evening for this virtual celebration. The Ebony Society of Philatelic Events and Reflection, fondly known as Esper, was founded in 1988 by Esper Hayes as a 501c3 nonprofit organization on a promise that she made to Jesse Owens. We lost our founder in January of 2019, shortly after our November 2018 celebration of 30 years as a club. Because of our dedication to our founder, we are dedicated to continuing her work by promoting stamps that showcase the African American experience. The Society currently has close to 300 members throughout the United States and in a few other countries. Both of our media platforms, the award-winning Reflections and our award-winning website, esperstamps.org, are excellent educational resources and help us to sustain our mission to promote the collection of philatelic materials depicting people and events of the African diaspora, to introduce African Americans to the hobby of philately, and to promote Black history at local schools, libraries, and philatelic events. Esper is ever present at local and national stamp shows, and we proudly represent our royal blue and white at unveiling ceremonies, especially those showcasing our history and experiences. We were determined not to let COVID-19 get in our way today. There are many ways to connect with us. In 2014, we had a major milestone and branched into social media. We would love for you to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Pinterest. We are both excited and proud to be here with you virtually tonight. If I may add, Manny Gilliard, Esper president from 1999 to 2011, worked tirelessly with the Schomburg Center for Research and Black Culture until his death in June of 2018. I'm sure he's looking in on this Zoom conference with us tonight. Back to you, Warshel.
Thanks so much, Walter. Esper has definitely extended its reach via social media, as well as our award-winning newsletter and website. It's definitely hard to believe our 35th anniversary is around the corner in 2023, and it really feels like it's happening tomorrow. Before I introduce Scott, I jumped ahead a little bit and failed to give you some history in regards to Walter. So I'll just share a little bit right now. He is a native of Warsaw, North Carolina, and currently resides in Durham. He graduated from the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill with a BA in biology. He's an avid, born and bred Tar Heel. Not only does he bleed Carolina blue, he also believes that our Carolina blue skies are evidence that the higher powers are indeed Tar Heel. Walter had two motivators to collect stamps at an early age. His grandmother, Sally Faison, was a domestic at Camp Lejeune Marine Corps base in Jacksonville, North Carolina. Often deployed soldiers would write her from various countries. Sally was fascinated by the colorful stamps, started collecting, and soon was writing back, encouraging the soldiers to write more often. She shared her newfound hobby with him. A second motivator was his mother, Sadie Faison, a school teacher. Her graduated students ventured to different parts of the US and the world and often wrote letters to keep a connection to home. She in turn became curious of the multitude of stamps and cancellations that showed up in the mailbox and started collecting them. As Walter grew older, of course, there were plenty of distractions. He became more interested in collecting baseball cards, rocks and minerals. Soon he was playing sports. He gained an interest in music, and there was no longer time for hobbies. Always a history buff, the issuance of the 1998 Malcolm X Black Heritage stamp and a gift from his wife, Trailblazer on stamps, made him again take an interest in the U.S. Postal Service. Faison soon started conversing with Sanford L. Bird and Maurice Eldridge and joined Esper in 2000. Under their tutelage, he began collecting Martin Luther King worldwide stamps. In addition to continuing MLK, Faison also collected the Great American Series, Distinguished American Series, the Black Heritage Series, Louis Armstrong, Nelson Mandela, Muhammad Ali, President Barack Obama, Blacks on US stamps, and places he visited, and most recently, the US national parks. Walter was voted onto the board of directors in January 2011 and elected president of Esper from 2012 to 2019, and now is the Esper secretary. He is also very active in the North Carolina Esper chapter. Walter is married to Desdemona. They have two beautiful daughters who have just completed graduate school this year. Kia received her doctorate of medicine and will be starting her pediatric residency this year. And Iana, their youngest daughter, just completed her Master of Social Work. Thank you, Walter, for sharing that history of Esper. Now, I want to welcome Scott to the stage. And let me share you some information about Scott. Scott English has served as Executive Director of the American Philatelic Society since August 2015. Before joining the APS staff, he served in a variety of positions in Washington, D.C. and South Carolina. In Washington, Scott worked for the nonprofit taxpayers group Citizens Against Government Waste from 1994 to 1996. He went to Capitol Hill to serve on the staff of U.S. Representative Mark Sanford of the 1st Congressional District of South Carolina and U.S. Representative Bob Barr of the 7th Congressional District of Georgia. Following his tenure in Washington, Scott joined the administration of incoming South Carolina Governor Mark Sanford and held a variety of positions, most notably Chief of Staff from 2008 to 2011. From 2011 to 2015, Scott joined newly elected State Superintendent Mark Zais at the South Carolina Department of Education. Zais currently serves as Deputy Secretary of Education at the U.S. Department of Education. At the department, Scott served as Chief Operating Officer, managing the day-to-day operations of a staff of nearly 950 people and a $4 billion budget. As Executive Director of the American Philatelic Society, Scott manages a 33-person team dedicated to serving 28,000 collectors in more than 100 countries with an annual budget of more than $5 million. Scott oversaw the construction of the new library located at the American Philatelic Center in Bellefonte, which opened in October 2016. It is the world's largest philatelic library. In June 2016, Scott recovered position 76 of the McCoy block of the inverted Jenny at the World Stamp Show in New York in 2016. After a successful capital campaign in 2018, Scott initiated a modernization effort to create a digital forward model for the APS and the hobby. Completion of the project allowed the APS to respond to the COVID-19 outbreak by providing content and connection while members sheltered in place rapidly. In 1998, Scott graduated from the University of Maryland, College Park with a BA in Humanities. Scott currently lives in Bellefonte with his wife, Kendra, both the proud parents of 3 grown children, Seth, Colin, and Tess. Everyone, let's welcome Scott English to the virtual stage.
Thank you, Warshaw. I really appreciate being a part of this. One of the things that isn't in my biography, but I want to share is that not only am I a member and the executive director of the American Philatelic Society, but I'm a 4-year member of Esper as well. And I'm very proud to carry that banner with me whenever I travel around the country. Let me start by saying this. On the slide, you can see a history of the APS going back to 1886, leading to the public or to the present. And it's a very proud tradition and a very proud history. I see a lot of familiar names, by the way, in the box. And for anybody who's listening to this, I really wish we could all be together to share this celebration in person and have a good time as we would normally do. Unfortunately, the circumstances don't allow that. But thanks to the forward thinking that we have with our partners at Esper, we decided that we should be able to get together and celebrate this anyway. And so, Warshaw, I really just want to say thank you to you for all the hard work that you put into this, and Bill Gicker, who's coming up, a good friend. I really appreciate all that you're doing. Just real quick, let me touch on one thing. The technology aspect that we're utilizing tonight is something that we have been focusing on for the last few years at the American Philatelic Society. The hobby is certainly an analog one, but the best way to connect people And the best way to get information into the hands of as many people as possible is really through delivering it through online courses, through our website, and a variety of other things. I've been talking to a lot of media outlets lately about the interest in the hobby with folks sheltering in place. And so I think tonight is a powerful representation of what this hobby can do when put into a crisis situation, and the leadership that rises to the top in situations like this. And so I'm just grateful to be a part of this. And I really thank the US Postal Service for always giving us some great stamps to celebrate. So tonight, you won't be able to do this. Normally when I'm at a first day ceremony, I'll tell you immediately to go and buy these stamps. What I will tell you is, if you get a chance, you can order them tonight online through the USPS website, or you can tomorrow, if you're making your way into a post office and you're willing to brave it, then please do. And while you're at it, make sure you thank the men and women of the US Postal Service, because while many of us were staying at home, those folks were hard at work and connecting, keeping us connected, and making sure that we could be sustained while we were sheltered in place. So with that, I will leave one more note, and then we'll move on to the next thing. And that is, along those lines, inspired by people like the men and women of the US Postal Service, we started a program called Stamps for Champs for APS members. What we ask of you is, if you would identify someone who's not an APS member today, who you think has done a wonderful job over the last couple of months during this crisis, and give them an opportunity to become a member of the APS. So please go to our website, stamps.org, and read all about the Stamps for Champs program. And please, please nominate someone so that we can share that with them. We can share the joy of this hobby with them. Talking about our initiatives, we've been focused a lot on our technology. The website is the central hub really to all that we do. Stamps.org is our website, and provides a lot of information. There's a lot of content on there. We have contributors from all across the hobby that help make that important. We help drive traffic there through social media. If you are on Facebook, please go and like our page if you haven't done that already, the American Philatelic Society. On Twitter, we are also very actively engaged at APS_stamps. And the same address is on Instagram. And we have a very, very vibrant audience on Instagram, because stamps are great for visuals. And over the last couple of months, for those of you who've joined us for Stamp Chats and some other events that we've done, we record those and put those up on YouTube. So thank you very much for being with us tonight. Thank you very much for giving us the opportunity to honor the artists and the stamps that have done that we're going to honor tonight. And I look forward to sharing the evening with you.
Thanks so much, Scott. Audience, let me tell you that during the COVID-19 pandemic, APS has mastered using virtual platforms. If you haven't checked out the APS Stamp Chats, you are missing out. We are honored to have USPS Stamp Services Director Bill Gicker Jr. with us today. Bill will be highlighting upcoming stamp issues. He has been Stamp Services Director since February 19. His career with UPS began in 1998. Prior to his current position as Director of Stamp Services, he served as Creative Director and Manager of Stamp Development. His experience in the Stamps division has included work as Art Director and Designer on numerous projects, including the 2015 Gifts of Friendship stamps, the 2016 Madonna and Child stamp, and the 2015 Barn Swallows envelope. Gicker served as art director for two 2019 projects, the Alabama Statehood stamp and the Frog stamp. The Director of Stamp Services oversees stamp development, stamp products, and exhibitions, the Stamp Fulfillment Services Division, and the Dulles Stamp Development Center, as well as the Citizen Stamp Advisory Committee. Mr. Gicker, please welcome to the virtual stage.
Thank you so much. I'd like to share with you some information on some upcoming releases. These were announced by the USPS on April 21st. First, I'd like to discuss the Enjoy the Great Outdoors stamps. They'll be issued on Saturday, June 13th. Right now, probably no ceremony, but we are not sure yet. With the release of the 5 Enjoy the Great Outdoors Forever stamps in a pane of 20, the Postal Service celebrates the many ways individuals experience America's abundance of natural beauty. These hand-painted designs depict 5 different scenes of outdoor activities, including building a sandcastle on the beach, hiking, cross-country skiing, canoeing, and biking. Up next, we will be issuing hip-hop stamps on Wednesday, July 1st. Postal Service celebrates hip-hop with 4 new Forever stamps in a pane of 20. Since its inception more than 4 decades ago, the electrifying music, dance, and art movement has profoundly influenced American and global popular culture. These stamps depict 4 elements of hip-hop: emceeing or rapping, b-boying or breakdancing, DJing, and graffiti art. The bold, digitally tinted images are intended to invoke motion. Next up, the fruits and vegetables stamps will be issued on Friday, July 17th. The Postal Service captures the classic beauty of still life paintings in a booklet of 20 Forever stamps, featuring 10 different portraits of fruits and vegetables. Each stamp features a collection of one kind of fruit or vegetable: red and black plums, heirloom and cherry tomatoes, carrots, lemons, blueberries, red and green grapes, lettuces, strawberries, eggplants, and figs. Coming up next will be the Ruth Asawa stamps. They will be issued on Thursday, August 13th. With these Forever stamps, the U.S. Postal Service honors pioneering Japanese-American artist Ruth Asawa, born 1926, passed 2013. Showcasing Asawa's wire sculptures, the pane includes 10 designs on a pane of 20 stamps featuring photographs by Dan Brodica and Lawrence Cuneo. Thank you stamps will be issued Friday, August 21st. In 2020, the Postal Service issues 4 new Thank You Forever stamps in a booklet of 20. Available for notes, cards, and letters, and thanks sent to acknowledge a favor, an act of kindness, a job well done, or gifts sent for any occasion, these beautiful stamps feature 4 muted background colors with gold foil overprinting. Next up, the 19th Amendment Women Vote stamp will be issued on Wednesday, August 26th. With this Forever stamp, the Postal Service commemorates the centennial of the ratification of the 19th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, which guarantees women the right to vote. Inspired by historic photographs, the stamp features a stylized illustration of suffragettes marching in a parade or other public demonstration. And last but not least, the Mayflower in Plymouth Harbor will be issued Thursday, September 17th. Whoops, we're ahead there, but I'll go through this one. With this Forever stamp, the Postal Service marks the 400th anniversary of the arrival of the Mayflower in Plymouth Harbor. The stamp's image is based on artwork of watercolor, acrylic, and gouache, a method of painting that uses opaque pigments ground in water and thickened to a glue-like consistency. The scene depicts the Mayflower as it arrived in Plymouth Harbor at dawn on December 16th, 1620. And since we have a philatelic audience here, I would like to share that these stamps will also have an intaglio element included. And now bringing us back to May. Of note, the American Gardens Forever stamps were issued last week on May 13th. With these stamps, the Postal Service celebrates the beauty of American gardens. This pane of 20 stamps features 10 designs, photographs of botanic, country estate, and municipal gardens taken between 1996 and 2014. The gardens include Biltmore Estate Gardens in North Carolina, Brooklyn Botanic Gardens in New York, Chicago Botanic Gardens in Illinois, Coastal Maine Botanical Gardens in Maine, Dumbarton Oaks Garden in the District of Columbia, the Huntington Botanical Gardens in California, Alfred B. McClay Gardens State Park in Florida, Norfolk Botanical Gardens in Virginia, and Stan Hewitt Hall and Gardens in Ohio, and the Winter Garden in Delaware. And the reason we are here today, virtually, Voices of the Harlem Renaissance commemorative forever stamps were issued today, Thursday, May 21st. More information will be shared about these stamps and the history of the stamp, the Harlem Renaissance during the celebration. The Postal Service will be sharing the information on other 2020 stamps in the near future, so stay tuned.
Thanks so much, Bill. USPS has an amazing lineup of stamps, and I can't tell you how excited the philatelic community was when you made that first announcement about the 2020 stamps. So I know my fellow stamp collectors, as well as the community at large, are ready to go to those post offices and purchase. We can't wait for them to be issued. Future favorite stamps for me are the thank you stamps. It's going to be thrilling sending thank you notes while using those stamps. When the stamp aligns with the actual mail, now that's perfection in my mind. It's also going to be very exciting for me when the women vote stamps are issued. Well, we could talk about these stamps all day, but let's focus on the Harlem Renaissance. According to the National Museum of African American History and Culture, with the end of the Civil War in 1865, hundreds of thousands of African Americans newly freed from the yoke of slavery in the South began to dream of fuller participation in America, including political empowerment, equal economic opportunity, and economic and cultural self-determination. By the late 1870s, strict racial segregation laws, known as Jim Crow laws, were passed that made African Americans second-class citizens. While a small number of African Americans were able to become landowners, most were exploited as sharecroppers, a system designed to keep them poor and powerless. Further, there was intimidation to keep African Americans from voting or exercising other fundamental rights. During this time, economies in the North and Midwest were booming. African Americans realized they need to seek areas outside of the South for a better life and one that was more racially tolerant. By the turn of the 20th century, the Great Migration was underway as hundreds of thousands of African Americans relocated to cities like Chicago, Los Angeles, Detroit, Philadelphia, as well as New York. The Harlem section of Manhattan, which covers just 3 square miles, drew nearly 175,000 African Americans, giving the neighborhood the largest concentration of Black people in the world. Harlem became a destination for African Americans of all backgrounds. The Great Migration drew to Harlem some of the greatest minds and brightest talents of the day, an astonishing array of African American artists and scholars. Between the end of World War I and the mid-1930s, they produced one of the most significant eras of cultural expression in the nation's history, the Harlem Renaissance. Yet, this cultural explosion also occurred in Cleveland, Los Angeles, and many cities shaped by the Great Migration. Alain Locke, a Harvard-educated writer, critic, and teacher who became known as the Dean of the Harlem Renaissance, described it as a spiritual coming of age. in which African Americans transformed social disillusionment to race pride. The Harlem Renaissance encompassed poetry and prose, painting and sculpture, jazz and swing, opera and dance. What united these diverse art forms was their realistic presentation of what it meant to be Black in America. What writer Langston Hughes called an expression of our individual dark-skinned selves, as well as a new militancy in asserting their civil and political rights. Among the Renaissance most significant contributors were intellectuals such as W.E.B. Du Bois, Marcus Garvey, Walter Francis Wright, electrifying performers such as Josephine Baker and Paul Robeson, writers and poets Zora Neale Hurston, Effie Lee Newsom, visual artists Aaron Douglas and Augusta Savage, and an extraordinary list of legendary musicians, including Louis Armstrong, Count Basie, Eubie Blake, Cab Calloway, Duke Ellington, Billie Holiday, Josephine Baker, Fats Waller, Jelly Roll Martin, James Weldon Johnson, and countless others. What is something else many of these leaders have in common, if you were to ask me? Guess what? Many of these leaders have been previously featured on USPS stamps. At the height of the movement, Harlem was the epicenter of American culture. The neighborhood bustled with African American owned and run publishing houses, newspapers, music companies, playhouses, nightclubs, and cabarets. The literature, music, and fashion they created defined culture and cool for all race and ethnicities in America and around the world. As the 1920s came to a close, so did the Harlem Renaissance. Its heyday was cut short largely by the stock market crash of 1929 and the resulting Great Depression, which hurt African American owned businesses and publications and made less financial support for the arts available from patrons, foundations, and theatrical organizations. However, the Harlem Renaissance impact on America was indelible. The movement brought notice to the great works of African American art and inspired and influenced future generations of African American artists and intellectuals to the world at large, challenging the racist and disparaging stereotypes of the Jim Crow South. In doing so, it radically redefined how people of other races viewed African Americans and understood the African American experience. Most importantly, the Harlem Renaissance instilled in African Americans across the country a new spirit of self-determination and pride, a new social consciousness, and a new commitment to political activism, all of which would provide a foundation for the civil rights movement of the 1950s and 60s. In doing so, it validated the beliefs that art could be a vehicle to improve the lives of African Americans. Let's welcome back to the virtual stage USPS Stamp Services Director, Bill Gicker. Bill?
Thank you for that. I'd like to thank you once again for having me, and I'd like to thank everyone who has joined us here tonight. I now understand that our esteemed friend, Dr. Henry Louis Gates, has joined, so I'd like to thank him for joining. I trust wherever you are tuning in that you and your family are safe and taken care of during these uncertain times. On behalf of the more than 630,000 men and women of the United States Postal Service, it is our honor to greet you for a digital unveiling of our newest stamps recognizing the voices of the Harlem Renaissance. One of the great artistic and literary movements in American history, the Harlem Renaissance of the 1920s was a time that saw African-American writers and artists flock to New York City neighborhood of Harlem. There, a legendary social scene formed based on the creative exchange of ideas, celebrating a shared history and experience. These new and distinctive voices embody the spirit of the times. The following four literary figures we honor on stamps today highlight diverse facets of the Harlem Renaissance. In two novels, Nella Larson explored the complex experiences of mixed race people, raising questions of identity and belonging. She is considered one of the most important novelists of the Harlem Renaissance. Alain Locke, a writer, philosopher, educator, and arts advocate, was a vital intellectual figure of the Harlem Renaissance. Mr. Locke wrote and edited some of the most significant publications of the movement and played a leading role in supporting and promoting writers and artists. An ardent bibliophile and self-taught historian, Arturo Alfonso Schomburg demonstrated the worldwide contributions of people of African descent. By tirelessly collecting books, documents, artwork, and other materials, Mr. Schomburg rescued Black history from obscurity and preserved priceless cultural knowledge for future generations. Known for unconventional imagery that evokes nature, gardening, religion, and myth, poet Anne Spencer provided a haven for African-American writers and intellectuals in her Virginia garden and home. It is a reminder that the artistic and cultural life of the Harlem Renaissance extended far beyond New York City. These are indeed four great voices of the Harlem Renaissance. The stamps that we are about to digitally unveil feature stylized pastel portraits of the four honorees based on historic photographs. Each stamp incorporates African-inspired motifs as background elements. These stamps are on sale now at post offices nationwide and at USPS.com, and would be a great addition to cards and letters mailed to friends and families, especially at this time. Thank you. And now with great excitement that we unveil the commemorative forever stamps honoring the voices of the Harlem Renaissance.
Thank you, Bill. I must just take a moment to let you all just breathe in those stamps. If we were at a first day of issue ceremony right now, there would be all this clapping, people walking up to the stage to take pictures. But now we're all in our homes, in our respective homes, just really taking in Bill's presentation in regards to the details of these beautiful stamps. There's so much history packed in your presentation, Bill, from Alain Locke to Nella Larson to Arturo Schomburg and to Anne Spencer. What is particularly fascinating for me is the reach of Harlem Renaissance beyond Harlem. You spoke about Anne Spencer's haven in Virginia for African American writers. Truly highlights the far-reaching impact of this period. As most of you know, originally the first day of issue ceremony was to be held in New York. I had the pleasure of interacting with Kevin Matthews, Chief of Staff of the Schomburg Center for Research in Black Culture, which is in Harlem. Mr. Matthews shared that 3 of the literary figures featured on the stamps have special ties to the Schomburg Center and its precursor, the 135th Street branch of the New York Public Library. Of course, I knew the ties associated with Arturo Schomburg to the center, but I did not realize that Nella Larson served as the staff librarian at the 135th Street Library, which housed the Division of Negro Literature, History, and Prints, as well as ties to Alain Locke. Thank you, thank you, USPS, for honoring these visionaries of the Harlem Renaissance. As much as we love the history behind the stamps, we also love the art behind the stamps. Everyone, let's welcome back to the stage Scott English, who will be introducing stamp artist Gary Kelly.
Thank you, Warshaw. We're very fortunate to have Gary Kelly joining us to share his artistic process, and I'm honored to introduce stamp artist Gary Kelly for the celebration today. Gary Kelly studied painting and design at the University of Northern Iowa, earning a BA in art. His early career focused on graphic design and art direction until the late 1970s, when painting and design experiences merged into a career as an illustrator. As an illustrator, his awards have included 27 gold and silver medals from the Society of Illustrators in New York, also Best in Show recognition in New York and Los Angeles Illustrators exhibitions. He was elected to Society of Illustrators New York Hall of Fame in 2007. Mr. Kelly has illustrated a number of picture books, including The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, Rip Van Winkle, The Necklace, Poe's Tales of Mystery and Imagination, and Macbeth for young readers. Of note, Harlem Hellfighters, a children's picture book illustrated by Gary Kelly about the African-American 369th Infantry Regiment serving in World War I, became a New York Times bestseller in 2014, placing it as one of the best children's books of that year. He's had one-man shows at the Academy of Art in Cincinnati, the University of Arts in Philadelphia, the Lustraire Gallery in New York, Every Picture Tells a Story, Santa Monica, the Hartford Art School, Art Institute of California, Laguna Beach, the Kentucky Derby Museum, Creation Gallery in Tokyo, and the Pablo Neruda Cultural Center in Bagnolet in Paris, France. Group shows include the Norman Rockwell Museum in Stockbridge, Massachusetts, the Chicago Art Institute, the Museum of American Illustration in New York, School of Visual Arts in New York, the McNay Art Museum, San Antonio, Mystic Seaport Museum in Connecticut, and the Librairie Nikkei in Paris. Gary Kelly has given lectures and seminars at the Smithsonian, Corcoran Gallery, Art Center College of Design, Art Institute of Southern California, Academy of Art, San Jose State University, Ringling School of Art, Hallmark Cards, Rhode Island School of Design, Societies of Illustrators in New York and Los Angeles, the Chicago Art Institute, the Norman Rockwell Museum, and the Montreal Book Fair in Paris. He has taught and given workshops at the Illustration Academy, Syracuse University Graduate Program, the Hartford Art School, and the University of Northern Iowa. He has been the stamp artist for various stamps, including the following: Gospel Singer stamps issued on July 15, 1998. The stamps were issued as an addition to the Legends of American Music series. The stamps featured gospel legends Mahalia Jackson, an international star considered one of the greatest gospel singers of all time, Roberta Martin, who formed her own gospel music publishing house, Clara Ward, a renowned arranger, composer, pianist, singer, and group leader, and Sister Rosetta Tharpe, who, with her signature guitar, helped introduce gospel into concert halls and nightclubs, and was the first gospel singer to record with a major record company. He also did the Oscar Michaud, the 33rd stamp in the Black Heritage series. It was issued on June 22nd, 2010. Filmmaker Oscar Michaud wrote, directed, produced, and distributed more than 40 movies during the first half of the 20th century. An ambitious, larger-than-life figure, Michaud thrived at a time when African-American filmmakers were rare, venues for their work were scarce, and support from the industry just did not exist. Michaud's entertainment and independent vision continues inspiring new generations of filmmakers and artists. The Great Film Director Series, Forever Stamps, issued on May 23rd, 2012. These stamps feature Frank Capra, John Ford, John Huston, and Billy Wilder. The four filmmakers received multiple Academy Award nominations, 15 Oscars, and numerous other honors during their lifetime. But their greatest accomplishment lies in the vitality and artistry of their stories they told through the film. Over a period of approximately 40 years, the quintessentially American filmmakers captured multiple contradictions, tensions, dark and light sides, and deeply personal interpretations that conveyed the American experience as never before. And of course, the voices of Harlem Renaissance. Mr. Kelly, thanks again for joining us.
Thank you for the assignment. I loved it. Can you hear me?
We can hear you great.
Yes.
Oh, all right. No, these are probably my favorite sheet of stamps that I've ever done. And I love doing the homework, the research on projects like this. I love making art by hand. Most of these are pastel on paper illustrations, portraits. I'm not really a digital guy, and I don't think I ever will be. But I love, on these portraits, first of all, I do my homework. I read about these people. I discover their backgrounds. That's all very important to me, all these people. But I think the way the stamps look was really a step forward as far as I'm concerned personally, because I had a lot more freedom to develop the composition and the images the way they fit with their backgrounds. They didn't necessarily have to be photorealistic renderings. I totally went into my library, and I have a book. I had a book there called African Designs from Traditional Sources. And that book added a lot to my backgrounds, which I wanted to incorporate with the shadows on the faces of these classic people. It was just a really enjoyable experience, and I'm so excited to have these out there, and look forward to another stamp, which I can't talk about right now, but it's in the works.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly, for sharing your artistic process. The stamps are just beautiful. I mean, hands down, beautiful. And everybody that I know that have seen the stamps have just stared in awe at them. The way you incorporated the African-inspired motifs as background elements is so engaging and adds an entire level of vibrant culture to the stamps. I'm not sure if you know how much stamp collectors appreciate stamp artists, but let me let you know, we adore stamp artists. Thank you for sharing your time with us, as well as giving us a glimpse into your thought processes when developing art for the stamps.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Well, we're at the end of this celebration. Scott, please come on in and join me. Everyone, thanks again for joining this celebration. Remember, if you're on social media, please use the hashtags Harlem Renaissance as well as Harlem Renaissance stamps. To purchase, go to your local USPS post offices or order online. And USPS has created two easy to remember links: USPS.com/voices and USPS.com/shop stamps. Requests for first day of issue postmarks and first day covers will be processed by USPS Stamp Fulfillment Services, 8300 Northeast Underground Drive, Suite 300, Kansas City, Missouri, 64144. A few shout outs. I want to thank APS for the amazing partnership. I also want to thank USPS for these amazing stamps and their continued service to the community. I want to give another shout out to Artist Montgomery of USPS for all of his support while we were trying to plan for this celebration. All the speakers, including our special guest speakers, Bill Gicker and Gary Kelly. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedules to join us. Because we're on virtually, there's no way in the world I can highlight special guests. We know from Mr. Gicker that Dr. Henry Louis Gates has dialed into Zoom. Also, we know that some of the grandchildren of the wonderful visionaries featured on the stamps have dialed in as well. Aisha Stromberg was going to be joining in, and she may be online at this point. Scott, I'm going to turn it over to you to close it out with your final thoughts.
Thank you. First of all, thank you all very much. You've honored us with your presence here tonight, and I can't thank you enough for being a part of this. For those of you who are already a part of the stamp collecting community, you're making a moment happen that's very important. For those of you who are not members of the stamp collecting community, I want you to understand just how incredibly strong this community is and invite you to join us. As a hobby, it's in a time like this, the hobby itself can provide a great way to relieve stress in these stressful times. But the other thing that it does is it brings you in contact with people who are truly amazing, and gives you a chance to be a part of a community that honors our history in a lot of different and diverse ways. And I want to thank you as a member of the APS and as a member of Esper Stamps. For those of you who are not members of either of those organizations, I want you to become a member. So please go to our websites, esperstamps.org and stamps.org. Those are the two websites that we have, and we'll certainly be providing that. But I'm personally inviting you to join both of those organizations because I'm very proud of what we've done here tonight. I'm very proud of the partnership we have with Esper, and I'm looking forward to many more great things to come. So thank you all very much for your presence, and thank you for joining us. Have a great evening.